Aloha, witches, and welcome back to Mysti-cal. We have finished playing Myst on stream, so it's time to review this 1990s surprise hit and see if it holds up to today.
Let's get the history lesson out of the way. Myst was originally released by Thin Cyan Inc. in 1993 for the Macintosh personal computer. It was the very first CD-ROM game released for personal computers, and if you're a 90s kid like myself and or had a kid in the 90s, I'd say there's a pretty high chance that you played this game. Myst was a critical and surprise success for the time, taking off in a way that no one really expected for a puzzle game. And this success is likely part of the reason why the game has seen 3 remasters since, as well as getting its 4th as it comes to VR in the near future. Although, in retrospect and with a little bit of nostalgia goggles, I'm honestly not surprised that Myst took off. It has incredibly well-designed puzzles, a deep and interesting story, and very original world building with interesting science fantasy twists. No other game, or media for that matter, has really matched with the atmosphere this game gives. The game is surprisingly open world for the time that it came out in, and it still holds up in that regard, particularly for a puzzle game where you wouldn't expect this kind of open-endedness. Myst launches without a lot of explicit narrative, but a lot of atmosphere, and this is where it excels. Starting up the game, the player is greeted with a narrated credit scene with a book falling through a starry expanse. No other explanation, no real understanding to what's going on, just a book falling through the stars. When it finally lands, all you can do is click on the book and pick it up, where you get to see some moving pictures in a way that books shouldn't work, and clicking on it produces that sweet, sweet classic linking sound that is just... yeah. That's some good audio right there. And this atmospheric storytelling is really iconic to Myst and something I have a personal fondness of as a writer. The narratives in this series are very much a puzzle, a mystery in and of themselves, encouraging you to explore and find out both more about how the world works as well as the story you're following. It doesn't really tell you a lot. And even if you have the CD-ROM manual, all you get is a note from some guy named Atris saying basically, hey, come help me, I'm in trouble. Which isn't really a lot to go on, as you end up on this weird hodgepodge island with no one in sight and just have to figure it out. If you explore a bit, you will find some garbled messages from some weird guys in books, as well as some cryptic notes that you can go around and start piecing things together. But overall, you don't really have a clear picture of what's going on. This is just as much a mystery as it is a puzzle game, and you have to piece this together as you solve the puzzles. The further you get in the story, the more pieces come together, and the more it kind of dominoes into the grander picture, but nothing is going to reveal itself immediately in Myst, which is a really good way to mesh storytelling with gameplay elements. But as you get into the story, you get introduced to the family drama that is Atris's life, that is the core story of the main saga of Myst games. Very quickly too, Myst teaches you that books are important and you should be taking notes. This isn't the kind of game where the textbook is never going to apply. The textbook literally has the answers, as well as everyone who is talking to you will give you hints about things that are going on. At the center of the island, you will find a library that has reference books on these places that you're not really sure where are. But you find out quickly that there isn't just one type of book in Myst, and that's when we get into one of Myst's coolest game devices, and that's linking books. Linking books in lore are a tool to allow you to teleport between dimensions, and this is such a cool narrative and game development idea. Like, this mechanic is literally every author's dream of, I want to write a book so good it takes someone to another world. That's actually what these books are, and it gets more into depth about how it works later in the franchise, but books, big B, in this series are both a science and an art, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on into what makes books and how they fit into the grander picture. But from a gameplay design, can we just realize how cool this is and how long-term this makes the series able to go to infinitely new and interesting places? This is a really cool development idea because it means that the devs can make worlds that go literally anywhere, and there's no limit to what kinds of ages they can ever explore, which can keep the game fresh and innovative. In any case, it allows the devs to have a really wide set of places they can take players and all kinds of puzzles they can throw their way. And even in the first game, you see that the devs are not shying away from going to lots of different places, be it the swampy forests in Channelwood or the eerie caves at the Salinity Age, or even just Myst itself and its weird mishmash of ideas are all incredibly interesting and unique and still really stand out decades later. But the highlight of any puzzle game is going to be, well, its puzzles. And Myst is really good as its puzzles. There's only one puzzle I would argue in this entire game that uses quote-unquote moon logic, which says a lot about this game considering where a lot of other puzzle games in this era went in the future and how interesting they could get with their solutions. Each of the ages in Myst have a corresponding book back in that main library, like I said, and they'll give you hints and clues about how the age works in general, as well as some ideas on how to solve those ages. These books also serve as a sort of tutorial to get you ready for the kinds of puzzles that you are going to be solving in that particular age. For instance, the Salinity Age is a really good example. The solution to getting into the Salinity Age is a sound-based puzzle, which is really fitting because once you get to the Salinity Age, all of the puzzles are based on sound. So the hints that you're getting in these books are leading you up and preparing you to solve those kinds of puzzles and variations of it in the age itself. But it's the Salinity Age that also highlights the biggest flaw in Myst, and that is its lack of accessibility. Despite all of the remasters of Myst, even the most recent port of Myst still doesn't have closed captions, and this makes otherwise really well-designed puzzles like the Salinity Age impossible to people who are hard of hearing or deaf. Further, the way to beat the game is locked behind already extremely garbled NPC dialogue that also doesn't have closed captioning, and even if you aren't particularly hard of hearing, it can still be difficult to understand this, and this information is important to solving the game. It's not like adding closed captioning would break these puzzles. The solutions to these puzzles still involve not only the sounds themselves, but the order that they go into. Adding closed captions would just make these puzzles accessible to everyone. This can be hit on a little bit further with Myst's choice to use very stylistic font, which from a design point I think is always very interesting and looks great to have different forms of handwriting, but I also think it can be difficult to read, and adding some kind of simple text converter would be a great way to also make the games accessible. I don't think this flaw is damning because I think it can be solved with future ports, and I would really hope on this 4th remaster of Myst they actually add closed captions to Myst. That said, arguably the reason why this is my only criticism of the game is nostalgia. This game is a classic for people my age, and I don't know anyone who didn't try Myst when it came out. I remember playing this game with my mom and my little sister, and my mom took what is arguably a 5-hour playthrough and turned it into weeks just so my little sister and I could solve all the puzzles. And I know a lot of people who had similar experiences playing it along with a parent and remembering the series fondly, even if they didn't really continue past Myst. It has a lot of nostalgic charm, and it's a shame that people didn't continue because the rest of the series is just as interesting. And that tightness in the lore and that classic nostalgic feel is something that I really want to praise the devs on again. If I hadn't read the wiki, I wouldn't have realized that the new age added in Rhyme was in fact a new age. Rhyme serves as a really good bridge between the story of Myst and the story of the sequel Ribbon, but if you didn't know this was added in a update to Myst, I don't think you would have noticed. It feels very true to the original, and that is a huge compliment, as adding in content later into a series is very hard to do. But even then, Myst itself, other than a couple teases for a sequel, stands alone extremely well by itself, which is a high praise for the first in a franchise.
In the end, I would honestly recommend that anyone who loves gaming history and or just wants a really tight, well-designed puzzle game picks up Myst at least once. Probably pick up one of the remasters just because they're a little bit easier to control and they have some better graphics that might make it a little bit easier to click on things and find solutions. One of the biggest flaws of this game is lack of accessibility, which is still a big issue, but it's something that can still be fixed in future patches and ports of the game. But I don't think that it's a huge detriment to say that the game should just be written off, and rather we should just encourage Cyan to use the resources they have and the fandom that they have to add closed captioning to their games. So I would recommend you pick up Myst or Real Myst and play through this game on your own, and try not to use a walkthrough for the first time through. You'd be surprised how much you can solve on your own. And with that, it's time to move on to the most difficult thing any media producer can do, and that's making a sequel. So join me on Monday. We'll be starting streaming Riven, and I will see you all soon.